Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the second session of Forum Europe Conference on the Future City, the core of the green and digital transition in Europe. I'm very pleased to be moderating today's session entitled Connectivity, Computing Power, Digital Infrastructure, and Domain Integration for Building the Digital Backbone of the Smart and Green City. I am Claire Marie, Senior Project Manager for Tech, Media, Technology and Mobility at the Center on Regulation in Europe, also known as CER, a European think tank dedicated to ever better regulation for regulated sectors. Decarbonization and digitalization have both been at the core of CER's research this year, with the publication of 3 reports, mainly one on digital roadmap for organizing mobilities authorities to leverage the power of mobility data, and a second one on coupling between electricity and gas supply systems to integrate the energy consuming sectors and optimizing them with the energy supply sector. And thirdly, on the EU ETS extension to road transport and buildings. We're also currently running a study particularly focusing on green data centers, which should be released in the autumn. All the reports are available on the CER website. In the panel 1 this morning, we just heard about the unique challenges around smart city data and how cities like Helsinki and London can use already open data to create cities that are greener, more efficient, and more pleasant to live and work in for citizens and businesses. During the discussion now, we will consider how city can leverage the technology, connectivity, digital infrastructure to use all the data coming from different sources in cities and in different formats. Indeed, the potential of smart city data can only be truly leveraged with the adequate digital infrastructure and network connectivity in place, allowing large volume of information coming from various sources to move quickly and securely, as well as enabling a safe real-time responses. As we've seen in the previous panel, great technological tools already exist and are being deployed in cities. Such technology include artificial intelligence, cloud, edge computing, high-performance computing, as well as Internet of Things in conjunction with 5G, local area networks, and other connectivity technologies that can play a crucial role in the functioning of smart cities. With data coming from multiple sources, however, integration between domains that would be normally isolated from each other is crucial. And to debate this topic today, we rely on a great lineup of speakers representing large European city, technology supplier, international expert from intergovernmental organization, as well as European policymakers. With such a diverse representation of key players, this debate will certainly provide our audience with some relevant experiences and key insight for building the digital backbone of the smart and green cities. Our distinguished speakers today include Cristina Martinez, who works at the European Commission as Deputy Head of Unit on Technologies for Smart Communities within DG Connect. Michael Donaldson, who is the Commissioner of Technological Innovation, Electronic Administration and Good Governance at the City of Barcelona. Zander van Lingen, who is Business Development Manager for Digital Cities at Dell Technologies, and Vida Rosete, who is Energy Policy Analyst at the International Energy Agency. A very warm welcome to all of you. And before I pass the floor to our first speakers for their first introductory remarks, I would like to invite the viewers to start thinking already of questions they would like to ask the panelists and to start sharing their questions via the event platform so I can pass them to the speakers after their introductory remark. Viewers can also contribute to the discussion via Twitter using the hashtag FutureCityConf. So I will now pass the floor to our speakers for their introductory remarks. Christina, let me start with you and pass you the mic now. Over to you to give us your thoughts on why you think this is a relevant topic for you. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Claire-Marie. And if I may, I would like to jump on your first introductory remarks immediately and say perhaps a bit more about the vision we have indeed of this contribution from digital to the systemic transformation of cities in Europe, cities and also communities, because we are looking here at every possible size, type, location, which is willing to achieve both the sustainability and digital transformation in Europe. First of all, I see digital as a tool, but is more than that. Digital is also giving new possibilities for new behaviors, for new business models, for a new way of doing things. And so before we used to say that digital was the backbone of a city, I dare to say now that digital can be also the eyes and the ears and the nose of cities. Why is that? Because you said you mentioned a number of technologies which help us capture data now at the edge of the network. So it's not only the highways, where the data flow, but it's also all this technology coming from citizens, coming from devices, objects, from lampposts, which are capturing information that is very useful to take informed decisions in a city. So they give you information about the traffic, they give you information about the weather conditions, they give you information about the movements of citizens, and all that can contribute to a better understanding of what is happening. And this understanding, if let's say, used and exploited, if appropriately made available to a number of stakeholders who need this data to take decisions, to do business, to move in the city, if done properly with the right tools, it can create a wealth of knowledge that is not only giving a lot of economic and social possibilities, but it's also a huge opportunity to better adapt and to mitigate some of the problems that we have to deal with at the moment and in the future, such as you mentioned them. There is the sustainability crisis, biodiversity loss, climate change action that is mostly needed in cities today, but also very, very pressing issues such as the housing crisis or the economic crisis, health outbreaks, you name it. And so we think that digital can contribute to this systemic transformation. We think that we have solutions. You have already listed them. So it's not a matter of necessarily doing leading edge research here. It's about deploying them and using them for what they're good at. And so the European Commission wants to support, to provide cities and equip them with open data platforms, with data spaces where this data could freely flow and could be captured, maintained, curated, shared among different stakeholders. We also want to equip cities with, for those who are more advanced, with tools that we call local digital twins, which is a digital replica of the physical environment in which communities operate, and help them capturing information from all the sectors: energy, mobility, water management, waste management, all these important sectors in cities which have a very important carbon footprint, but also an impact on the quality of life. And this will help them to visualize, model scenarios or adaptation algorithm that can eventually, again, improve the quality of life of citizens and also the economic and social opportunities for everyone in the city. So this is in a nutshell how we see the potential of digital in this endeavor. We have a number of instruments which we can propose for this. Of course, there is a policy framework that has been built along the years to make sure that data can freely circulate among different stakeholders. The data strategy has also proposed a number of data spaces in Europe that could connect eventually at the European level, but we want to start at the local level with local data spaces, and those data spaces by sharing the same standards and the minimum interoperability requirements or mechanism that they need, will be able also to interconnect at European level and therefore provide more data, more knowledge. We have a program called Digital Europe Program, which will fund the deployment and the scaling up of a number of solutions in this area for cities, by cities. And we have also other important instruments which have to do with the governance of all this. We have a Living in EU movement in Europe that the Commission supports, the Committee of Regions, but also Eurocities, OASC, the European Network of Living Labs. So these organizations are helping mayors to organize themselves and to promote the values and the principles under which they want to procure digital solutions. We support those mechanisms and those principles. They're based on openness, they're based on transparency, they're based on EU values like protection of privacy and so on and so forth. And these are very important elements that will help the implementation of these technological solutions. And then finally, because we always need to look also at the financing capacity of cities, we know that also the sources of financing will need to come from different horizons, not only from the European level. And of course, there is plenty of interesting instruments in this aspect. You have to think of Invest Europe, the Research and Recovery Fund. The Resilience and Recovery Fund, the structural funds, of course, but also instruments coming from the private sector, the European Investment Bank. So there are a lot of potential sources of financing for this new society and new era that is coming. Finally, on the instruments, I want to mention the mission on climate neutral and smart cities, which will be helping cities to achieve their transformation and become sustainable by 2030, with a number of very necessary tools, but more about it later on. So in a nutshell, we have a vision that I think is compatible with the European Green Deal's objectives and the digital decade elements. This vision will be achieved through a number of instruments, and eventually what we want to do is to help mayors and citizens to prepare the future, adapt for what's coming, and keep, very importantly, a quality of life that is at the level of their expectations. So that's for my short introduction. Thank you.
So much, Christina. This is so clear now. We know that Europe wants to provide a clear vision to cities and also provide the right tools to help them, achieve the goal that you've mentioned about climate emission and climate goals, and also making cities, a great place to work and to live for people in Europe. I like what you've just said, that those technologies don't only provide the backbone, but also the ears and the eyes and the nose of cities. It's quite a very, very visual image here. So thank you so much. We'll move on to our second panelist today, who's Michael from Barcelona. Bon dia, Michael. Thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Your role is actually very, very crucial in city, because you're the Commissioner for Technological Innovation. And this is very, crucial in cities. And you're the one who really manages all this idea about the data, but also the infrastructure. You are also a trainer in open government and transparency, and you've published several articles on public management. So we are very keen to hear, Michael, your thoughts and your experience in the city of Barcelona around, digital infrastructure and the technology you are planning to use and the roadmap in Barcelona. So, Michael, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot, Claire-Marie, and thanks a lot Forum Europe to invite the city of Barcelona today. It's great to share with the rest of the panelists this discussion about how the digitalization impacts on our city, and more specific, I would say, in our citizens, which is what we care from the City Hall of Barcelona. I like to take you on a journey, on a very, very, very brief journey of our different model, or maybe I'd say a strategy on digitalization. We started like any other city with this idea, the classical idea of a smart city. Well, we started, and we're still working on it, which is basically about how to gather all the data that comes from the city, or in terms of mobility, of pollution, of public transport and private transport as well, and all these other data that gives us the knowledge of what's happening in the city and allows us to take a good account on what's going on, so we can make better decisions. We can see whether to cut a road, where to increase the capacity of the buses or the subways. All the decisions regarding to this more aseptic data. We are under the construction of a data lake in order to gather all this data. We developed it last term, our office for data, for our municipal data office, and as I said, we are still working on that. But at the same time, we've shifted to this idea of humanizing technology, which is which responds to the idea of what can technology do in order to help the problems of the citizens. It's technology not for technology, not technology for data, not technology for infrastructure, which is of course very important, but it's more at the people's it's in order to answer to the people's needs, to try to increase the quality of life of our citizens. And so in order to deploy this strategy, we are always thinking, as I said, and putting our citizens in the middle of our decisions. And regarding to this digitalization dimension, we launched Decidim, which is our platform of political and public participation, our digital platform, which allows not only to gather the intelligence that comes from the city with the data, but also the collective intelligence that arises from our citizens. In this platform, we can hear their proposals, we can hear the deliberation on different public issues, and we can even get their proposals into a public into a participation budget process. We can even develop and deploy through the investment their ideas. We currently, now at the moment, we are going to invest 30 million euros based not only on the proposals of our citizens, but also in the votes of the citizens. We're going to close it on the 20th of June. There are more than 1,000 proposals which the citizens can vote. And we're also working on this idea of what we call shifting from the reactive administration to proactive administration based on AI. We've got a lot of data from our citizens. We can know what their needs. So we can, instead of waiting for them to come and ask for our services, we can try to deliver the digital services in a more proactive way. There are some studies at the European Union level that shows us that almost 30% of the population cannot access the grants, the subsidies, the helps, the services they are allowed, because they don't know they even exist. If we've got the data and we've got the consent of them, of course, let's be more proactive, and let's tell them what are the public services that the administration can give them to them. And then I would like to, I'm just running over my 5 minutes, but I would like to take a point on this last year. We all know what happened in terms of the pandemic. We all know how we suffer all this pandemic and the lockdown, and it has a very impact on the digitalization, because we all kind of duplicate our life, the real life and the digital life. We worked, we did all our shopping, we had our relationship with our families and friends, our skilling or reskilling, our training courses through digital basis, digital dimension. But that means that we've created another problem on our agenda, which is the digital divide. There's a lot of people that cannot afford the access to internet or access to computers or even to all the training courses. This is a big problem we have now at the minute in our cities. And if we don't want to leave anyone behind, and if we want to come stronger after this crisis, it's something that we need to take we need to be keen on this. We need to focus on this. And this is why in Barcelona, we're launching several programs to fight against digital divide. We're trying to make them from a different perspective, because as I said, the digital divide that we had last year has nothing to do to the current situation. Thanks, Claire-Marie.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's very helpful to have, concrete, feedback from your own experience in Barcelona, and what you said about the humanized technology to help problems of citizens also, and to really ensure you're using data to really help your citizens is very crucial. You've been launching several programs already, so it's definitely useful to get to know those, and we will probably cover more of this later in our discussion. I will now pass the floor to our third speaker, Zander from Dell Technology. Hello, you're the lead technology digital city division in Europe, and you are helping companies and cities find the smart and sustainable technological solution that fit their needs. So it's very nice to have you in here. Thank you for joining, and I will leave you now the floor for your 5 minutes introductory remarks.
Thank you, Claire, and thanks for having me. Of course, as being part of a technology provider, I will dive into the perspective of the technology, and being part of many programs and projects across Europe, I believe that we are on a critical junction. The world is changing faster than ever before, and we have the opportunity to lever government stimulus funds and to tackle our local, European, maybe even global challenges. Looking ahead, where cities evolve to guard our health, digital transformation of cities and IoT innovations will be critical. Will be a critical part of Europe's green and digital recovery. And I believe that support from the EU is key for our cities and their digital transformation to adopt smart technologies like mentioned, Internet of Things, AI, cloud, multi-cloud, and edge computing. I think it's key providing funding for projects, programs, and provide funding for it, and to develop knowledge centers where cities can actually share their best practices instead of reinventing the wheel. Let's prevent them from reinventing the wheel, and let's accelerate those cities and make sure that they spend their funds wisely. When I look at the evolvement of smart cities, I see that we are moving into a new maturity level where we connect things. So governments and local administrators are not focusing just on implementing a smart solution anymore, but more working towards a collaborative model, also on data sharing and how do we work with data. I believe this is a shift which will create lots of value and economic opportunities. As the pandemic has shown, the importance for the government services need to be delivered efficiently and fast, and it provides the collaboration between, or it proves the collaboration between government, universities, and businesses are key to scale projects and the adoption of services. To support collaboration and acceleration, I believe there are two critical topics. One is how to develop a digital environment to bring everything together. And secondly is how to build a trust model for data sharing. Of course, at Dell Technology, we enable cities with providing the underlying infrastructure that enables the development of smart solution. And we've seen that a digital city or a smart city can be accomplished by creating open, data-rich, people-centric digital city platforms based on open standards and common frameworks, built on a foundation that integrates solutions from a robust ecosystem of partners, where interoperability and trust is key. We believe in a 4-layered approach to building a digital city, and I can elaborate on the 4 layers maybe later. But this approach will be key for cities to harvest the full benefits of smart technologies. Cities must focus not only on the technology, but also on what kind of city do they want to be and what actually is quality of life for them. They need to focus on how to organize and realize the long-term ambition, team up with peers, with partners, and learn from their failures, adopt their lessons learned, and build a strong ecosystem. We have a great example of how this is done in Curaçao. But with that collaboration comes the other challenge, which was my second point: trust and data sharing. We've partnered with Air France KLM, the University of Amsterdam, and we've built a digital data marketplace that enables safe access to data. Of course, this is a use case in the aviation industry, but we can definitely transform it into other industries. So data sharing through a marketplace for use cases like predictive maintenance. This project actually became leading for the Data Sharing Coalition and the Amsterdam Data Exchange, which is an EU-funded project. We are excited about these programs. We are happy to share our knowledge, and we'd love to collaborate on initiatives like this, where we can help accelerate innovation and drive human progress. I'm eager to answer all the questions that we have. So looking forward for this discussion.
Thank you so much, Sandra. This is very helpful to understand what you also have so much experiences with cities, and what you've already highlighted is the critical importance of a right collaborative model, not just in the city as such, but also between cities and governments, but also with the businesses and universities. And like you said, the pandemic is a great example and really showed that very well. The trust model for data sharing also you've highlighted, and I think we'll cover that in a moment, because this is already what you have given us a great case study, and I think there are plenty as well here. And this is also great to see. This is one that has been funded by the EU as well. And the importance of a roadmap to be developed by cities seems to be also critical, to have a strong ecosystem, to build a strong ecosystem. So great point. Thank you. I think this is we're going now to move to our last speaker for their keynotes, and this is Vida. Vida, thank you for being with us today. You are an energy policy analyst at the International Energy Agency in Paris, and you are leading the energy efficiency division work on digitalization. What is the key message you would like to share with us today? Thank you, Vida.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity to participate in this very important and timely event. So we've already, from my fellow panelists, heard about opportunities and some of the challenges that need to be overcome towards enabling cities to leverage digital technologies for decarbonization, to build resilience and enhance sustainability and livability. To complement this discussion, there are a few points that I'd like to raise. The IEA recently published the first global net zero roadmap for the energy sector, and this explores how a net zero by 2050 scenario could look and what are the milestones. And the scenario shows a massive rate change in terms of clean technology deployment, in terms of investments, and importantly, it also highlights the role of behavior change. And just to illustrate some points on the magnitude in terms of global deployment. So currently we have around 11 million electric vehicles, so cars deployed. In the scenario, we're looking at this needing to reach a deployment of 350 million already in 1 decade and 2 billion by 2050. Similarly, if we look at heat pumps, today we have globally around 180 million. Over the next decade, we would need 600 million. And by 2050, 1.8 billion. So some really big numbers here. And in terms of relevance for the discussion today, there are some few key points. So if net zero by 2050 is to be reached, there's an urgency to act now. Incremental action will not get us anywhere close to such targets. Another key point, behavior change and people are at the center. Our analysis indicates that around 55% of the cumulative emission reductions in this pathway are linked to consumer choices, purchasing more efficient products, retrofitting buildings, changing transport behavior. Another key point, power systems will be profoundly affected with changing demand patterns and new peak demand. And digitalization and policy and business model innovation is absolutely central to enable power systems to grow and to operate effectively, taking into consideration the influx of new renewable energy, variable renewables, as well as the large number of distributed energy resources, such as batteries, such as rooftop solar. And cities need to be at the center of clean energy transition. Cities have a direct impact on energy demand and on enabling the deployment of renewable and low carbon technologies through urban planning, zoning, building energy codes, transport system development and optimization, permitting, public procurement, infrastructure. And even more importantly, cities are closer to citizens and can have a greater influence on enabling and incentivizing behavior change. So against this backdrop, this year, on the request of the Italian G20 presidency, we're developing a report focusing on how cities can take a leading role in clean energy transitions by use of digital technologies, as well as focusing on what national governments can do to support cities. And an important point that was also raised by my co-panelists, clean energy solutions in the context of cities provide a myriad of benefits that are relevant to making cities more livable, improving well-being, reduction of pollution, job creation, enhanced resilience, improved security. Going forward, it's very important to capture all these benefits in order to make a stronger business case for decarbonization and to help accelerate progress. And so, as was discussed this morning by my fellow panelists, one of the greatest benefits of digitalization in the context of cities and energy is the data to be used for decision making. But as Sandra emphasized, progress is under the collection and use of data. However, today, most cities still have very limited access to data and do not have robust data management frameworks and the advanced tools needed to process and protect data. Another point that was mentioned that I'd really like to emphasize is, irrespective of city mandates and responsibilities in the area of energy, in the area of policy implementation, much greater coordination between all levels of governments are needed. Similarly, interoperability and international standards play an important role in ensuring that all these deployed assets and all the data sets that are being collected can be used in the most best possible way. Capacity building and reskilling and upskilling, absolutely crucial, both when we look at city administrations, but also at other parts of the population that are to be utilizing digital tools and that should be able to reap the benefits of these. Another point that was mentioned already, but access to finance does need to be boosted. We know that many cities are struggling with budgets. They have a lot of multiple priorities that need to be considered. So to progress towards decarbonization and greater levels of sustainability, their efforts are needed to enable city administrations to take advantage of existing funding opportunities as well as to build capacity on developing bankable investment projects. And as I mentioned at the outset, urgency. And there are significant opportunities to further scale up and accelerate progress, as was mentioned by Sanders, through increased experience exchange, learning lessons from each other, and finding opportunities to build on the knowledge base that already exists around the world, and to leapfrog and jump over the mistakes that others have already made. And then just a final point, but very importantly, there are risks associated with digital technologies, and these do need to be tackled at the inception phases and not come as an afterthought. Social dimensions need to be considered, ensuring equity in terms of access to benefits. There's a need for robust data management and protection frameworks. The indirect and direct energy demand of ICT equipment needs to be continuously addressed. Asset and equipment repairability, upgradability need to be considered. Circularity needs to be promoted, and measures need to be taken to ensure cyber resilience at all levels, power systems, city control rooms, to homes and individual assets and equipment. So I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to give you some insights from our upcoming report. We'll aim to publish it in connection with the G20 Climate and Energy Ministerial on the 23rd of July. And I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Vida. That's a very complete picture you're giving us, also at the international level, of your experience at the International Energy Agency. And it's true that your organization has been very vocal recently, saying, raising the alarm bell, saying we need to act now, otherwise we will never achieve our targets of net zero 2050. And cities should be playing a key role in there. Everyone should be active, but cities should give more power as well and work closer, because they are also closer to citizens, as you said. And the mandate, you've mentioned a couple of initiatives like interoperability, the use of international standards, also the skilling, upskilling and reskilling of people in administration, but also in the population is key to integrate those technology. And access to finance, that it needs to be boosted, and that's all those points I think we can cover now in our open discussion now. And also I invite people to start also continuing sending us questions on the chat. We have already received a couple of them, so maybe I will use one already that has been sent, and I think is quite relevant to our discussion here, to look back already at what have we learned from current case studies. So perhaps one for Christina. I will start with you first. There's a question from the audience, a reporter at Digital Chazen, and he's asking, or she is asking, do you know what our experience from the past or current case studies in which technology and policies have contributed to a truly smarter and greener city? Do you have any feedback from the people, from the citizens, and what can you share with us on this? So Christina, do you have any experience you can share with us today?
Yes, of course. But I sense that the question has a lot of, has a bigger context, and perhaps I would like to thank Vida, by the way, for giving the whole picture, which was for me, of course, a given, is that we're talking here about technology for a purpose. So we're not selling technology here just, for the sake of pushing more the evolution of tools and devices. The idea here is that we need to serve a purpose, and that purpose was brilliantly recalled by Vida, is to manage the crisis that is coming. Climate change requires a huge decarbonization of our society, and cities with more than 75% of GHG emissions are the place where we need to start this decarbonization effort. And it's also the place where a lot of systemic projects can take place, because it's where all the sectors intersect. And so we have a lot of pilot projects that have been funded under our research programs in the past, and I can name a few. I can even give you some links, like the Synchronicity project or the autopilot projects, that we're looking at optimizations of those sectors using cross-sector data. There is one project on mobility called, for instance, Kiss My Bike. I'm sure you will remember this one. There were projects about air quality management, clean air school districts, for instance, or the Rain Brain project, which has to do with smart blue and green roofs in cities. And they bring, because we're, of course, asking for indicators and a constant evaluation of the results of the projects, they bring a tremendous improvement in the areas they're trying to tackle. So, but I take the point, which is, yes, of course, it has to bring value, and the value has to be demonstrated. So you need good indicators, and you need to methodologies that are reliable to demonstrate their benefit. Now, there is also a need for taking into account the impact of the technology itself. Vida mentioned the e-waste, for instance. So the fact that technology is in itself a source of pollution, is in itself a source of rare earths and basic resources consumption, has a price, has a cost on energy consumption. So it is always at the expense of something else. If we want to reduce our CO2 emissions and our greenhouse gas emissions, we will have to look at the whole picture. And so that's why I say that we need to make sure that whenever we deploy solutions, we have a good impact assessment of what's their added value. Now, it's not up to me to say, because I think it's a philosophical discussion, it's a societal discussion, what's the let's say the contribution of technology to our society and to cities in particular. But I think that there is no society in history that has gone backwards. Actually, we will have to write the opposite. We will have to use technology for what it's good at. And we will need to be very aware and mindful of the negative consequences of this deployment. And this we can do because we have tools, we have indicators, we're going to push even more for that awareness, of the consequences of deploying solutions. They have to be, as I said, contributing to improving the big picture. So just to give you some use cases, but in any case, we can continue the conversation, because I understand that this is a very important issue. There is acceptance, and there is a need for buying from the users. That's fundamental. That's why we always say governance is key. Nothing will happen in the cities if you don't have with you all the stakeholders, citizens, the private sector, universities who are providing knowledge, and of course, the local authorities, who are taking responsibility and ownership of the solutions and the projects that they're proposing with public money. And so all that needs to be indeed blended into an open innovation ecosystems where everyone, every voice are heard, and they all contributing to the shaping of the solutions with the technologies they want, they like, and they think are the most useful ones.
Thank you so much, Christina, for answering this question. And I'd like to move on maybe to another questions here to develop maybe also some concrete feedback and illustration of some of those technologies that already exist, solution like you've mentioned, Christina and Sander, the digital twins. But also edge computing, maybe how that can be used for smart cities, and what are the benefits for cities and for citizens. If you have any already experiences that you can share with the audience. Perhaps I will start with Sander here.
Yes, I mean, I think they enforce each other, edge computing and digital twins. But I mean, the topic digital twin is very wide, because you will have very different digital twins for different purposes. So for instance, you can have a digital twin specifically focused on urban planning and your mobility challenges. And you can have a total different digital twin for your electrical grid in your city, or maybe your buildings. So I believe that if you look at digital twins, it really helps policymakers to visualize what we are talking about. Because if we are talking about data, and if we are talking about smart solutions, you cannot touch it, right? So in order to make it speak for itself, you can visualize the data, and I believe that digital twins are an awesome tool to do so. And within a digital twin, you have different levels. So you have the level of just visualization, but I don't think that's really a digital twin. I believe it becomes a digital twin when you can really use analytics on top of it to predict things, or to predict scenarios, what if scenarios. What, for instance, if we are talking about mobility, what happens if we introduce an X amount of electric cars, electric vehicles into the city? What will that do? If we want to build a new road, what will that do with the traffic flows? So those what if scenarios, they will visualize what's about to happen, and that will enable policymakers to make faster decisions and better policies. To the point of edge computing, I think that if we have smart solutions in all the cities, there's way too much data to handle. So we need to figure out what data is actually relevant to act upon immediately. And that's where you need to have edge computing in place. Just to analyze as close to the data source as possible before transmitting the data over the network into a cloud environment, a data lake environment, or whatsoever. The most common used example is with autonomous vehicles. If an autonomous vehicle detects something in front of the car, you don't want to have the car ask the cloud, what should I do, and react upon the answer. You want to have the car immediately make the decision, there's something in front of the car, so hit the brakes. So you don't want any time delay there. That's the purpose of edge computing, to handle the data as quickly as possible. And we should figure out ways what's the best architecture for different solutions in our cities. So I hope that gives some insights on.
Yes, thank you. That's very clear. I think it's also important to understand when you come from a city, so perhaps for Michael here, how you also use those technologies already, and what, especially with this cross-sectoral approach of data coming from different departments within, the city of Barcelona. How do you already see or plan to, cross those data and make them work together and ensure there is integration? If you can develop and tell us a bit more, what are you already doing in this field?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's a very good question, because at the end it all relays on the way you organize yourself and the way you develop and deploy your public policies. Because I mean, Christina was pointing it before, and Sander was giving us examples on edge computing and digital twins, and there are so many. I mean, there's so many technological solutions. In the last 20 years, only in the last 20 years, we have experienced as many as digital disruptions and technological disruptions as the whole history of our humanity. I mean, it's so huge. There's so many new technologies coming in that after a couple of weeks, they are not new at all, that it's very, very, very difficult to manage them. Well, first, to understand them. I mean, I get a call from my mother every 2 or 3 days asking, what's new on this WhatsApp? Should I report? Should I block? Should I pay? They're asking me for a Bithum. What's a Bithum? Okay. You just send the pictures, and that'll be all. So yeah, it's as I said, there's so many technologies, and we, the public administration, it's difficult to cope with them all. And so this would be one of the barriers, or one of the difficulties, in order to deploy all the potential that the technologies give us. As Christina mentioned well before, they are here to stay. and we need to use them because it increases our quality of life. Of course, it's got their negative effects or their negative externalization, and that's something we need to work on. But it's obvious that they are here, and we need to use them. But before using them, as I said, we need to understand them, and we need to have a purpose. And so this would be one of the first issues we need to tackle. And the other one, yeah, it's the classical, and it's the classical when it comes to public administration, the way we are working in silos, the way we are specialized in verticals in order to deliver more efficient and more impact services. But at the same time, which this is something good, at the same time it's bad in terms of cross-cutting approaches, in terms of innovation, in terms of coordination, in terms of tackle the different challenges and problems that we have. As a teacher here in Barcelona says, the problems in the city are not organized in the way our departments in the municipality. So we need to have all this internal governance. And as I said, it's something that we are not used to. And when it comes to digital and when it comes to technology innovation, it's all about this cross-cutting and transversal optics. And yeah, it's something that it needs to really work on it because I mean, everybody's got a lot of work, and everybody's got a lot of issues, and everybody's got the citizens' pressure and the problems at the front of their desks. And so it's difficult to introduce new ways. I mean, introducing the data lake, introducing the AI, introducing all this technology, it's kind of disruption for the whole organization. And it takes a while to understand the benefits because at the beginning, it's all problems that are being added to the old problems we had. I remember coming to an end. I remember listening to the general manager in Madrid, in the municipality of Madrid, a couple of years ago, and they asked him what were they doing in order to coordinate, to boost this inner governance, in order to tackle all these the issues we were saying. And he said, well, we went on a strategy, very, very innovative strategy. We made the different departments, and everybody was like expecting what's coming in. So we made them sit at the same place, and we made them talk between each other. Okay. So I'm talking about the capital of Spain. I'm talking about the general manager of the city of Madrid, and the more innovator policy was make the different departments to talk and to try to solve the problems they had in common altogether.
It's a great point you're saying. Actually, the barrier is not always the technology. There's so many technologies. It's actually the communication or the mentality. You mentioned your mom. I think we all have a same experience, or everyone has these challenges as well. And it brings back to Vida what she was also saying about the importance of actually skills, internal skills, but also the population needing to also understand this technology and to use it, and also to trust it. So very, very good. I think there's one more question before we kind of go into the final, maybe a roundup. Is actually about a critical point you all mentioned. It's the finance. It's always there at the end of the day. But it's also cities cannot all afford on their own to build those massive infrastructure, and also they need the skilling. They need to reorganize internally. There's massive need for funding here. And Christina, you've mentioned at the European level, a lot of funding will be made available already. Making available to cities. Cities have many players they can go to ask for money and for funding. And at the international level, Vida, of course, there needs also funding for other countries, because we don't want a digital gap between regions across the globe. That will be also not helpful. So we need to also make sure that emerging countries and other regions in the world also develop this and are not left behind. So what do what in your experience can you share with our audience on, the importance of, ensuring investment and also the competition here that is needed at European level, also ensuring financing of European business and international companies to build those technology. So is anyone wanting to just talk about this point of finance and the importance of it? Sander, you want, and Christina as well? I'll start with you, Sander.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, my mic. Yeah. So do you guys hear me? Yeah.
Maybe I'll start with Christina first. It's better.
Yeah, I don't know if the sound is okay on your side. Yes. Okay. So very briefly, Sander, while you join us back. So the dimension which I have already said is, the financing dimension is very important indeed. We've elaborated a little bit about it, and Vida has already proposed a few leads on how cities could, collect all the financing they need to support projects. Michael has been testifying from his perspective, the governance dimension of that. Perhaps I want to say one thing that I think is important in your question, which is how much open and what kind of level playing field you facilitate with depending on how you design actually the process for this transformation. We're very concerned about the fact that, for instance, some of the cities are locked in specific solutions, and then it's very difficult for them to later on build other solutions that are very custom built, that are perhaps more specifically suited to their needs. So our approach is to support standards, open software, as much as open source software, as much as possible, and making sure that whenever you join this EU movement and you want to make use of all the tools that will be made available through public funding, you do it by adopting the open standards that are promoted in this movement. So of course we cannot be prescriptive of every single data format or how API should be described in this or this environment or subsector. So what we have is rather a kind of framework where everyone defines what are the minimum interoperability mechanism to exchange data, to expose it, present it, and so on and so forth. So there are principles for different types of activities, data, but also for digital twins, but also for fair AI management, and and all these functionalities that are part of a switchable data platform in a city. And then everyone has to choose and pick up which one they prefer. What we want to do is to host those conversations, is to support this participative process of agreeing on the type of standards they will use whenever they want to create a new solution that requires data from multiple or heterogeneous sources of information. So, and that's, I think it's the never-ending story of public policies supporting interoperability. We need to support these conversations between the different sectors. And and perhaps one word, because somebody was asking about spatial data. The localization in spatial data is fundamental. We have Copernicus, which is a European program supporting the acquisition of data, mostly satellite data, but also Earth observation data from sensors, from in situ, which are actively contributing to our capacity to understand what's going on. So for me, it's a key element actually in the data spaces that we're building in Europe. So yes, they're fundamental. And by the way, they're very advanced because they benefit of a legal framework called the Inspire Directive, which helps them already to be very much interoperable at a fast pace. So basically, that's what I wanted to say in terms of how do we see interoperability and how do we see those conversations, which of course have to do also with how we are going to finance the projects and what the business models will be for long-term sustainability. I think it's all part of the same approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I think we'll wait. I'll wait for Zander to come back to ask him as well this question about the funding here. Perhaps Vida, you also mentioned this as part of a requirement to have access to funding. Can you elaborate a bit more? Are the recommendations from the IEA when it comes to funding, and if you have any already experiences of best practices usage of those fundings for cities?
Thanks so much for the opportunity to share some insights around that question. I think that there are a number of points that are important to consider. One is enabling cities to access funding that already exists. There are programs for climate projects, for green projects on the international level, national level, regional levels. However, in order to access funding, cities do need to build capacity in terms of developing bankable proposals and projects. And as Michael was saying, the technologies are complicated. They're coming up at a massive speed. It's a challenging area to navigate. So there's significant opportunities that could be done in terms of both building capacity at the city level or devising systems of intermediaries or support mechanisms to enable cities to access already existing funding. Another area to explore is how to utilize digitalization to create new opportunities for city revenue, new business models to stimulate private investments in digital technologies for decarbonization. Again, significant opportunities that can be explored there, and a lot of benefit that could be derived from sharing experiences between cities within countries, but also internationally. And a third point, just taking into consideration the urgency of action needed in terms of decarbonization, the importance of the role that cities play, making new funding sources available and accessible to enable cities to accelerate and build out systems that support wider international and national, of course, decarbonization efforts.
Thank you, Vita. I will ask the same question then to Sander. Now you're back. I think we can hear you fine now. It's just, can you share your experience of also you being, a massive infrastructure development companies, how you are using those fundings, and what do you think is useful for the future in terms of funding? Thank you, Sander.
Yes. So us as a company, we do not aim on those different funds, but it are always our customers who are, and we support them. And I really want to emphasize, and the point is already made, the technologies are coming so fast that maybe we should not focus on the current technologies that are being launched for my specific department and my specific purpose. So we've seen some examples of cities or regions, like Vida mentioned, really focusing on what is our priority. If we want to hit our climate goals, what do we need to do to achieve that? And think from the end goal back into steps you can take now that can really contribute to reaching those goals, instead of focusing on everything. Focus on those points that really help to realize your ambition. And by doing so, you can definitely find a great or build a great ecosystem of partners around it. And we have a great example of how that's, for instance, being done in Curacao, where they have the challenge of their oil industry declining. They are heavily dependent on tourism, which due to the pandemic has been lost. So they've actually built a program to hit their climate goals, but also to shift their economy into more sustainable green energy. They want to be the green energy provider for their region. And they want to, instead of currently all the talents are leaving the region. They want to create a region that will attract those talents in order to work on those great initiatives that they are working on. So I really believe that looking at the endpoint, create a roadmap to it, really helps. And the way they work is they use digital twins actually to visualize things and to bring departments together, work on specific topics, because then they can immediately see the impact of their proposed solutions on the screen in an instant. So yeah, I really believe that could be the way forward for a lot of cities, regions, maybe nations.
Thank you, Sander. I think we have 2 minutes left before the end of this panel discussion. We've covered a lot of ground, so maybe I will ask each of the panelists today to kind of wrap up for 30 seconds their top line takeaways on what they've learned from this conversation before we close our event. So why don't I start with you, Michael? What are your main takeaways?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Claire Marie. Again, well, as I said before, it's important to have a strategy. It's important to use all the technology, but I think it's even more important to have a purpose. In Barcelona, we've been on this journey from the smart city to smart citizens, and now we are under this idea, the concept of humanizing technology, and specifically after the COVID, the pandemic, and the lockdown, where trying to introduce, we are introducing on the agenda the fight against the digital divide, to make sure that this great idea of leaving no one behind becomes reality. Thanks, Claire Marie.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. Shall I go now to Christina from the European Commission to share your top line takeaways from the discussion today? Thank you, Christina.
Well, I actually learned a lot, thank you, and I felt there was a lot of common understanding of what the big issues are, and we were sharing most of the principles and the values. So this is for me very rewarding. My perhaps 2-3 takeaways are that everyone acknowledges the fact that we need to make a journey that we've never done before. The challenge is huge. We need to build a new world with today's technologies and with today's mentalities and with today's cultural constraints, with a system that is still benefiting from, yesterday's view. So this is going to be challenging as a task, and it will probably require more than just a little bit of creativity and financing. I think that there is, in the cities, there is a lot of potential for achieving this, because we have a unique place where citizens, the economic sectors, the policy sectors can talk to each other in a much more effective and pragmatic way than it can in international fora. So if something happens and changes, I think it will start in cities. What I want is to make sure that the technology that we provide and that we fund with public money will exclusively be used for that purpose. That's the idea. And I dare to say that if it's not sustainable, it's not smart. And perhaps conversely, if it's not smart, it will be hardly sustainable in the end. Let's see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. I'll go now to Vida for your main takeaways of today's discussion.
Thank you. So from today's discussion, there are a few points that really resonated. One is the references to having a plan, having a strategy, identifying what are the challenges, what are the problems that you want to solve, and then devising the strategy towards what are the technologies, what are the functionalities that are needed, and where to find that funding. But definitely the need for strategies. Another important point, people at the center, because ultimately we're wanting to develop livable cities that enable people to live in a sustainable way, for people to be able to reduce their climate impact, and thinking about people through every step of the way when embarking upon digitalization programs and plans. And finally, an important point to consider, and we were talking about great technologies and all these opportunities associated with them, but sometimes the most important steps are not high tech. They're, like Michael said, getting the right people to sit around the table and discuss, and breaking institutional boundaries, sharing experiences, and laying down plans together. And for that, you don't need digitalization. Hopefully in the future, we'll all be able to connect more in real life and to find those tables and have those conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vida. Yeah, human at the center is true. You're a good point. Thank you for raising that again. Sander, you're the last, so I'll give you the floor now to give your top line up following the discussion today.
Yeah, I believe we're all aligned. Like Michael mentioned, we need to think cross departments. We need to have a purpose. We need to bring people together in order to hit our climate goals or our challenges that we face. I believe everybody wants to get there. I think the challenge is not tech. The challenge is how do we organize ourselves to get there. That would be my my final remark.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So thank you to Christina, Michael, Sander, and Vida for your very valuable contribution today, and for this conversation that's been providing a lot of food for thoughts to our audience, I'm sure. Personally, it's been a real pleasure to moderate this panel discussion today. And so thank you all. Thank you to Forum Europe, who have made this event possible and even ensured a gender balanced event. And last but not least, thank you to all the viewers for their attentions and for the questions. Stay tuned to follow the next showcase session from Dell Technologies titled Smart Cities with Smart Solution, which will take place on the showcase stages. Thank you, everyone, and I wish you a very good end of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.